Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you an unhaul video. So today books are leaving my shelves and I've split them into separate categories. So we've got DNFs, we've got books I didn't like, we've got books I think are okay, books that I didn't even try, double copies, and also books I loved, which is a very new section to my unhauls. But I'm going to talk you through why I've got these sections and what I am unhauling today, because there's quite a few books that are going to go. As usual, we're going to start with my DNFs. These are books that I did not like, and so I stopped reading them, and therefore they will not be staying on my shelves, because for why would I keep them on my shelves when I hated them? So the first one here is To Cage a God by Elizabeth May. I gave this about 50 pages and I didn't understand what was going on. It was absolutely nonsensical. We didn't get any semblance of world building, of character. It was just writing in your face. I don't really know how to describe it better than that, but it was just like the book was yelling at me, and it was yelling at me loads and loads of different things, and none of them made sense and none of them added up. And so I thought, you know what? I'm not going to read this. And so I DNF'd it at 50 pages. You Root Sam by Dustin Teo. Now I can't actually tell you how many pages into this I got because I didn't make it very far, and that was a long time ago. I started reading this one and the writing was just so bad, and I was really disappointed because I absolutely really love the premise of this one, which is about a girl who has a boyfriend and then he dies, and then she's on the phone listening to his voicemail and then realizes she can actually talk to him through the phone. It's about this girlfriend kind of grieving the relationship that they had, but is unable to move on because she can still reach him through that phone. The cover is gorgeous, the premise is everything that I would love in a young adult contemporary, but the writing is just so bad. I find it hard to put I find it hard to put my finger on what is bad exactly, but it's just everything. And so I was going to give this book a second chance, and I started to read it again to give it a second chance, and I could just not get past how bad the writing was. And so I thought I just need to DNF it once and for all. So it's actually got 2 DNFs on it, and this was one of my anticipated reads, so I'm really sad about the fact that I didn't like this at all. And then the next DNF is The Sunbearer Trials by Aidan Thomas. This is kind of a middle grade-ish, young adult-ish fantasy books for fans of Percy Jackson, but I was just reading it and I wasn't vibing, I wasn't enjoying myself, and it wasn't necessarily that anything was wrong, and I could have read this whole book and it probably would have been a 3 stars by the end of it, but I read enough of it to know that I was just feeling quite meh. I was turning the pages out of an obligation to turn the pages rather than a want to, and those are all signs to me that the book just needs to be DNF'd. So I did that, I DNF'd it. Moving on here now, we've got 3 books that I read and I did not enjoy them. So again, for why would I keep books that I did not enjoy? So I'm not going to. One of these is The Skin That Was Once Mine and Other Disturbances by Eric LaRocca. I've read 2 Eric LaRoccas that I have really enjoyed. One that I felt okay about, and then this one which I actively didn't like. It's a horror short story collection supposed to be full of unsettling short stories, and the only thing it unsettled was my conviction that I was a fan of this author, because I didn't like 3 of the 4 short stories in this, which is the majority of them, and I only really liked one, which was his abstract horror one. So I feel like if this author comes out with a collection of abstract horror short stories, I'll be a fan, or another abstract horror novel like he did with Everything the Darkness Eats, I'll be a fan. But for some of their straight up horror books, I just don't really think it's working for me anymore. So unfortunately this was a bit of a disappointment. It's not looking good for horror here, but it is Looking Glass Sound by Katrina Ward, which is another unsettling horror book. It's told in this very unique layered way, which takes you a while to understand, but once you understand it, I still didn't care. So that was the problem. I didn't care about this book. I feel like I didn't particularly like or get attached to any of the characters. In fact, the main character, whose narrative you hear from the most, was getting quite annoying around the 25% mark, and continued to annoy me more and more as I read the book. So I wasn't a big fan of the main character. The plot itself, while it's pieced together and structured in a very clever way, by the time that I got to that reveal I didn't really care about it, and I kind of figured most of it out, and sure there were a couple of things I didn't see coming, but it didn't really disturb me, it didn't really horrify me. I think it relies a lot on being quite realistic in its horror elements, which is good and can be scary, but I don't think the writing descriptions scared me enough for all of my horror to be in it being quite realistic, if that makes any sense. And then another one that I just didn't enjoy was A Portrait of Shadow by Nicole Jarvis. This is historical fantasy. I don't really read that much historical fantasy, but I wanted to read this one because it's about Artemisia, who is an artist that I really like, but it was really slow and really boring, and I think that was the problem. Slow, boring books don't really get to me. And while I like the premise and I like the world building and the concept, the fact that it was so slow paced and dragged out this plot that wasn't really a plot with stakes to it made it a big problem for me. I liked some of the characters, and then most of them I just felt okay about as well, so that was unfortunately a no. And actually it was really disappointing that it was so long, because the further into it I read, the more annoyed I got at the fact that things weren't happening. So we've got a big stack of books here, of books that I think are middle of the road books, probably gave them 3 stars, and the reason I'm unhauling them is quite different for each one. A lot of my 3 stars just have to go because I don't have that much shelf space. So if it is under a 4 star, it's about 99% sure that you are going to leave my shelves. So let me talk you through why these ones are going as well. It's not obvious why they're going. So I read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is a nature sciencey book about indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge and the teaching of plants, and I found it really interesting. It was incredibly well written. I appreciated how it was written. I learned so much about this, and it made me think about a gifting economy versus capitalism. It made me think about nature and the world that we're connected to, and it reiterated how much we still have to learn from indigenous culture if we would only pay attention and integrate it into our own education systems more. So I'm saying all these great things that I got from this novel, so why did I only give it 3 stars? Why am I hauling it? And it's a me problem. It's not a book problem, it's a me problem. And the me problem is the fact that if I am reading a nature book, I'm always wanting to go out to that nature to see it for myself. I'm not someone who appreciates and feels wholesome and relaxed when reading about nature, when watching a nature documentary. As someone who likes hiking, as someone who has camped a lot, as someone who enjoys being outdoors, I don't want to read about the outdoors, I want to be out there. I'd rather go to the US and go to these places and learn about these plants and see the indigenous practices being doled out rather than reading about them. And so that's why this didn't work for me. It's just a matter of the fact that I cannot get what I want from reading a nature book, and I don't think it's particular to this book, I think it's any nature book. We have Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. I just thought this one was okay. It's a historical fiction about Ireland during the times of the Troubles, and it was good enough. But a lot of this actually focuses around the fact that she is having an affair with an older man throughout the time period of the Troubles, and I just don't particularly like reading about cheating. I've said it many times on my channel, it's just something I don't enjoy reading about personally again. So the fact that this focused so much on the cheating element just didn't really work for me. And while I enjoyed seeing her try to be a teacher through the Troubles and some of the things that happened in this book, ultimately it just wasn't one for me. It didn't rock my world. I read it, I remember reading it, but it's going to go. This one is The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. It was one of the oldest books on my TBR when I read it, and I had a fun, good time while reading it. I appreciate incredibly clever characters, and I appreciated what the story did. I enjoyed it. However, it's not one that I think is very impactful. I don't think I'm going to remember it in a couple years' time. I just don't feel like I need to hold on to it. It's also quite outside of my comfort zone because I mostly read classic mystery crime novels. I don't really read this kind of fictional crime that true crime fans could enjoy, and it didn't have a bit of a bubble or a big ending. It kind of just ended, which was okay. It wasn't abrupt, but it just didn't rock my world with a good climax or a good finishing exploding point. So I'm not gonna keep it. Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. This is a young adult novel, and a lot of this is focusing on identity and self-discovery. We've got an American Persian main character who has depression and anxiety, and he's going to Iran to meet his family, his extended family, for the first time, and this has to do around grief as well. And while I appreciated what this book did in terms of depression and anxiety representation and showing the importance of having a friend in your life, and even discussing like him and his dad's relationship and their connection through mental health, all of that was particularly fascinating and well done. I just think the writing in this one again was really straightforward and very tell over show, and so I didn't feel as much of an emotional connection to this book as I would have wanted to for something that has such an emotional subject matter. So not one to keep either. We've also got Mame by Jessica George. I'm glad that I finally read this because I saw so many different opinions on whether it was good or not, and actually a lot of people recommended this to me as in, she's a carer, you're gonna enjoy reading this book about a carer who is black and young, and that's me, but not this book. Not this book. This book should not be recommended on that basis because she is a carer for all of 5 minutes in this. We're meeting her as she's emerging from being a carer into the rest of her life, and now that her life is not overshadowed by dealing with her father's schedule, she's like, what am I going to be now? Who am I going to be now that the carer narrative is taken away from me? And again, it's like one of these like black self-discovery books, but she gets entangled with this troublesome white man, and I'm just so tired again of reading these narratives of young black women who don't know anything about life despite them being in their 20s, getting into a relationship with these older white men, and then it's toxic. Like I've read Luster, I read, what's that one, Everything's Fine. Like how many times am I going to read this same narrative? Such a fun age. I've read it, I've read it, I've read it. She can't do it unique anymore. It's done, move on, we can tell other stories. And so I think the repetitiveness of this is what bothered me a lot. And while I did kind of like the character and I was interested in where the story went, I do think it's a bit boo-hoo, everything's sad because I lived my whole life being a carer, and just kind of resents the fact that she was a carer. And you know what? Can't relate. Even though the circumstances are a bit different, and a lot of this has to talk about like culture and cultural expectations and such, I liked it, but also I didn't like it because I do think it's told before, it's done before, and it represented some things in a way that really annoyed me. I'm always so much harsher in my unhauls than I am in my wrap-ups, but you should check my wrap-ups out for a bit more of a balanced opinion, because when I'm unhauling a book it's so easy to be like, and this is why I didn't like it, when actually it was okay. And the book that I'm waving around now is The Wickedest by Caleb Femi. I didn't even haul this in because I hauled it in and then I read it immediately and then I wrapped it up and I'm unhauling it immediately. And that's because for me it was just an okay poetry collection. I really liked that it focused on like black happiness and freedom and joy and community, but it also delves into individuals, characters' stories in this collection, and I feel like it just didn't do it enough for me. I wanted more of that character depth, and this one really skimmed the surface. And it's not written in the style of poetry I tend to enjoy, but it's very accessible and easy to read, so I imagine that there's other readers of poetry who are going to love this one and snap it up. We now have some books that I didn't even try, so I can get through these quite quickly, and for many of them the reason will be very apparent. So the first one is Darius the Great Deserves Better. This is the sequel to Darius the Great Is Not Okay, and having found that Darius the Great Is Not Okay to be an okay read, I don't particularly feel like I need to read the sequel. The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to read Looking Glass Sound all the way to the end is because people said it's quite gothic in its horror style and you need to get to the end for the reveal to happen. People say the same thing about The Last House on Needless Street, and you know what? I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for the big plot twist for me to know whether or not I like a book. And after having read Looking Glass Sound and not enjoying it, I don't really feel a pull to read any more of Katrina Ward's books. I also read the first page and it started from the cat's point of view, and animal points of view really turned me off, and I don't think it's going to be from the cat's point of view for the whole book, but it was enough. it was another sign for me not to pick up this book. Last but not least, we have An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan, and this book has just been on my shelf for so very long, and I was going to do a try chapter and maybe read it or unhaul it, but I looked at this one and I picked it up to do the try the chapter, and I thought, I don't even want to read a single chapter. I don't want to even give this book the chance of a single chapter, which means it's definitely time for it to move along to a new home. So it's going. Now we're on to double copies. I only have 2 of these. The first one is The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. This is a stunning gold foil proof. However, I have a stunning Evernight book box subscription version and I just don't need 2. As I said, my shelf space is limited, and so I try my best not to keep double copies, which is another reason why I'm unhauling this lovely copy of Giovannis Room by James Baldwin. I was sent a collection of James Baldwin books to celebrate his centenary, which is lovely, but I did already own Giovannis Room, so again, just not keeping 2 copies of books that I already have. I'm also unhauling 2 picture books that I read. The first one is April's Garden and the next one is Felix's Favourite Day. Look at my cute nephew. Isn't he cute? He started standing and he started walking with something that supports him, and so he can have these picture books, and if I read picture books they usually end up going to him at some point, or some of them stay here and I read them with him when he comes to visit, but not on my shelves. And now we get to the last category of this unhaul, which is quite new for me, and it's books that I have enjoyed. Now, I went to the Netherlands recently, which is where the other half of my books are stored, and here in the UK I literally have no more space. My shelves are double stacked on this one, single stacked on this one because they're hardbacks and I don't like to put things on top of hardbacks, and I have another shelf over there which is triple stacked. It's triple stacked. I don't have any more space, but I do love books, so what I do is I read them and I pass them through. Only the best of the best get to stay, and they get to stay in the Netherlands. And I went to the Netherlands, there's no space there either. Oh, tragedy. So my parents were really good at gave me some more space to work with, but really there's no more space in the Netherlands, which means from now on I need to be very selective with the books that I keep, and so even books that I enjoy might not make the cut anymore. However, we're going to start with Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. In a recent reads wrap up I talk about how convoluted and complicated my feelings to this novel are. It's actually one that I found okay, but I put it in this like stack because what I do is I get cheap versions of classics, and then once I've read them I unhaul them, and if I want to keep that classic on my shelves I get the Penguin Classics cloth bound or paperback editions, because those are the collections that I keep, or the collection of classics that I'm collecting, and so I know they've got Great Expectations in cloth bound and I'm going to pick that up at some point. So even though this is like a Barnes & Noble exclusive with deckled edges, I did only get it for I think about €3 to €2 in a Dutch sale for the book, so I am not keeping this because I'm going to replace it at some point. I read and enjoyed Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali. I liked the disability rep in it, I liked the romance in it, I liked the Muslim rep in it, and I think it said some really important things about Islamophobia as well. But it was generally one of those books that I call a nice story, but not one that I loved. It just missed out on having some elements that I particularly loved. And so I did enjoy this one, and I think if I had more shelf space, it's one I would have actually kept, but alas, I do not. And it's not love material, so it can't stay. And similarly, I also read I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver, which has a character who comes out as non-binary to their parents, and then their parents actually disown them and kick them out, and it's about what they do after that. It's a young adult contemporary, has romantic elements. It's a very quiet story, but also a really powerful one, and I love all the queer joy books that we're reading, and in some ways this book too does have queer joy, but it also talks about what should you do when things don't actually go right in the coming out process and go as wrong as they possibly can. And so it's an important one, but I'm going to put it back out there into the world for other people to enjoy. Last but not least, I'm unhauling a 5-star read, which is Act Your Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I gave this 5 stars. I adored this. I had so much fun with it, but there is one person in my life who loves Talia Hibbert more than me, and that's my best friend. This is my lovely best friend, guys. Her name is Yana. You might know her from some videos, and she's the only one who loves Talia Hibbert more than me. And I have told her for a long time, because I got her a copy of Get a Life Chloe Brown, and then kind of gifted from Charlotte, she got a copy of Take a Hint Danny Brown. I'm gonna give her my copy of Act to Age Eve Brown, because then she's got the complete trilogy and she'll probably fly off into heaven and leave me behind. But it also means that I can then get myself another copy. This is the US edition, so it doesn't actually match my paperbacks in size, so I can get myself a shiny new paperback. And I did get this one secondhand, and Yana likes it when I give her secondhand books. That's what we are doing with that. That's why a 5-star is being unhauled. And there you have it. Those are all of the books that are going to be leaving my shelves and giving me some more space to put some of my new in books. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what was a book that you felt okay about, but also like one you don't necessarily need to keep on your shelves. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!